Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to your Jackrabbits post-game show on Jackrabbit Illustrated with Zach Borg. I'm Brendan Lidke as normal. Zach will be a little late in case you didn't see on Twitter. He's got a couple things to wrap up at Dakota News Now, so you're stuck with me. To start off with, we'd like to thank our title sponsor, Kubota Dealers of South Dakota, with 8 locations across the state of South Dakota. Make sure you check them out if you have UTV, tractor needs, attachments, parts, service, or anything in between. There's always one close to you with 8 different locations across the state. As always, we are on our Jackrabbit Illustrated Twitter and Facebook pages, and later on our Jackrabbit Illustrated YouTube and podcast form, as well as being on the FFN network, as I like to call them, FCS Fans Nation Network, on their YouTube. So be sure to check that out. We are going to be going back over the big game here against Illinois State tonight down in Normal. I'm sure maybe we have some mixed emotions about how it went. In the end, it's a blowout victory, 40-21. Not a lot to complain about, really. When you look at it, there were concerning things, however. The inability to not get a penalty in key moments was problematic. I think most people would probably be most frustrated with that. We struggled with stopping some of the pass game and things like that. Scott Rust here says, yeah, penalties. It was brutal. And crazy enough, I look at it now, looking at the stats, there's only 9 penalties, which felt like there had to be 15 or 20 of them, which was wild. But that was kind of the way it went. It was always at a bad time. There were big penalties, 15-yard penalties, pass interference penalties, things like that were just brutal. Kickoffs out of bounds for penalties, just can't have that. The first one, I'll give you one with what they're trying to do, but you can't do more than that when they're doing that short kick to try to make them return it, which was successful when they got them to do it. So Sean Marlette says, for a big win, it wasn't satisfying with so many mistakes. And, I agree with it. Chad's here. I don't know if he wants to hang out in the background or not, but I see him here.
I didn't know if you wanted me on until Zach showed up. Sorry,
it's fine. It's fine. It's all good.
Thought it'd help you out.
Started off so hot. You're up 20-0 in the first quarter. And then I think the frustrating part was letting them hang around. But you got to remember, this isn't a terrible football team we were playing. We weren't playing, I don't know, Indiana State, or I almost said Illinois State, which would have been weird. Or anything like that. And like Zach McKinnell says, Isaiah Davis is a grown man. That's the biggest takeaway. When he's on his game, he's damn near impossible to stop. Yeah, him and the Hogs had a day.
Yeah.
Traditionally speaking, it is difficult to run on Illinois State, and it's difficult to put a ton of points up on them. And Davis, he has had a day. He had 199 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. But I mean, really, the whole Jackrabbit offense, the whole line was bulldozing dudes. 374 yards rushing, 200-yard rushers, because Amar Johnson went over 100 yards as well. Honestly, Angel Johnson, I thought he was going to bust a couple at the end. When you're running the clock out with some of your twos in there, and he is one guy away from busting a 75-yard run, he looked really good, even as the backup role.
Third back, yeah. So
right.
to speak.
As the third back. But man, overall, offensively, I don't think there's really much you can criticize. They did a great job, specifically early in the game, with gashing them with the play action pass. It was big Zay run, big Zay run, big Zay run, bang, Yankee for a touchdown, bang, Yankee for a touchdown. Later in the game, you could tell in the second half, Jesse Royston says 374 yards. Is that good? Seems good. It's all right. It's not bad. Jim Poppin says 22 almost average first down per carry. Yeah, Isaiah averaged, I think, gosh, what was it? Looking here. Jeepers, 9.8 yards per carry. That's absurd. 197 yards officially on here. I guess on the broadcast they said 199. I'm looking at the Jackrabbits app for the stats. It says 20 rushes for 197 yards, 2 touchdowns, long of 49. Yeah, he was on his game. The Hogs were on their game. They were really moving people around. I don't know. I know Matt tweeted that, there's like the majority of the teams in the Missouri Valley are now running some version of a 3-4. And from what we've seen the last 2 weeks, I don't know if that's the best thing to do, but I guess everybody makes their own decisions because the Hogs are just throwing people around on that stuff, and it's awesome.
The best thing to do with the 3-4 we keep hearing is run straight at it. And I'm kind of torn between us trying to push the ball downfield and just sticking with what's working.
Well,
we were running all over them, right? But
right.
then, you could tell we were trying to push the ball downfield, and it seems like their secondary was doing a pretty good job covering our guys. But you got to keep them honest. So,
well, a lot of it was high protection, 1 or 2 receiver routes. So,
yep.
If they cover those, that happens. But on the flip side, you do have to keep the receivers happy to some extent. You got to give them their shots. Especially especially in today's day and age, I know the run game was clicking, but you want balance, number one, so you don't end up like NDSU where you aren't good enough at throwing the ball to make a comeback. You don't do it enough. And number two, I mean, with the transfer portal, you have to keep your receivers happy. We've got crazy talent at the wide receiver position, and there is an extent of you've got to get them the ball.
Yeah, anymore. That's truly the case. I mean, luckily we have the Yankees who don't really fit that, but
right.
Yeah. And I think they're out there because they're so good at blocking. That's one of the reasons we saw more of them. And, the one was hurt, so he's kind of back now.
Right. Yeah. But no, it was awesome. I mean, it was pretty awesome. Goodness, the offense was unstoppable. Zach McKiddle says there's a 0 chance I'd run a 3-4 against a run first team with a good offensive line. It makes the outside line, the offensive line's job so much easier in terms of blocking assignments. Yeah, it does, and I get that they're running it because of, a lot of the conference is starting to spread it out more and sling it around a little more. So I get it. But boy, better get it figured out on the run game because that's kind of the bread and butter of winning this conference. So I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know what you thought, Chad. I think special teams was probably the biggest stub toe in my mind. Hunter Dustman just wasn't. He just didn't have a good game. I think everybody recognizes that. Tough game. From a pick standpoint, it was great for me as I took Ben out on that with he makes that field goal, I end up losing the pick instead of winning. So
yeah, that's okay.
I don't know. I think the reason that it was such a dissatisfying game is we started so fast with so many points. And it's not like we didn't score a ton of points anyways, but
we still left a lot out there. Like, Zay's one run got called back. Every time we had some momentum going, we killed it with a penalty. We were giving away touchdowns with penalties. I mean, that's how I saw it. But
yeah, I don't think we gave away a lot on offense. I mean, we still scored a touchdown after Zay had the ball. I think I don't have the numbers for time of possession per half. We held the ball for 11 minutes more than they did, 35 minutes to 24. But I do think it just felt like we were going to walk away with this one and everyone was going to get to relax. But Illinois State did a good job, and it feels like they scored 35, 40 points But they only scored 3 touchdowns, which is an aberration for this defense. However, still not gobs of points. We didn't give up 35 points or anything like that. It just was close enough to make you hold your breath all game, and it kind of put a lot of pressure on the offense. But you give up 7 in the third. You only give up 1 touchdown in the second half. We only scored a touchdown in the second half. I think it was frustrating from that standpoint and the penalty standpoint. Every time you felt like you had them stop, we had some sort of silly penalty that all of a sudden they're down, and you give them crazy field position for their first 2 or 3 drives.
Right, and I guess I was talking about that penalty that Mason had that kind of killed that drive.
Right.
Specifically on offense, but
right. Well, the offense was a lot cleaner than the defense. Ben is obviously playing with numbers. I beat him. He's lying.
When you're talking betting, he's right.
I'm gonna go re-listen and see if he changed it. But here he is.
Hey,
fresh
Zach,
from Dakota
what's up,
News
bud?
now, Zach Borg.
Hey guys, hopefully with less feedback today. I do have some earbuds on, so hopefully that'll help.
That is great. Yes.
Well, and hopefully you won't hear a spike in the background, because I'm also going to try and I'm also posting my nice web content to web too. Had a lot of good stuff tonight. Obviously, we got some really good highlights from our affiliate out in Illinois, who, fortunately for them, I'm sure they would have rather not had about 5 touchdowns dropped on them in the first 2 quarters, but good stuff for us, not for them. Of course, we had a lot of I went down to USD as well, got that game a little similar in the fact that one team got off to a quick start, then kind of went to sleep for about a quarter in the third, and then put it away. But a little bit of Augie football, and although I know some fans might be a little disappointed, we had to lead with Augustana hockey getting their inaugural game, which we had some great highlights from our affiliate up in Madison. So, I don't know what Jackrabbit fans feel about that, but it definitely was kind of neat to see a Division I hockey team representing the state of South Dakota. And they lost 4-0. They got 41 saves, though. They didn't play too badly, so they'll have their home opener next week. And very busy night, and even a little soccer stuff too, but obviously I know everybody's here for the good stuff of college football. So,
it was a wild game. Oh, I don't know if you have your audio on your headphones.
I do. I can.
Do you?
Yeah, but it might have switched.
Anyway. Yeah, I can still hear you guys. Good.
Okay. Yeah, I get a lot of feedback here.
Okay. I hope could just be my microphone. Could be my microphone on the laptop, but.
Oh yeah.
The kicker sucks.
Brian put some money on that game. He's an NDSU fan, and he put some money on it for us to cover. So that would have happened.
I was going to say
easily.
I tweeted it out. I am at a mouse here for this as well, but that could be a bad beat. I don't know. Van Pelt typically does a pretty good job of scanning every other level of college football, and I checked it at like 1:00 today before the USD game, and the line was at 20. I don't know if it moved at all. Maybe if it moved down to 19 or if it moved up to 21. But obviously, they get out to the 20-0 start, and you're thinking, oh well, they're gonna cover this easily. No, and then they get that touchdown at the end, and they go for the 2, which I understand why they wanted to go up 21. And it was a trick play that it looked like for a minute he completed it, but he didn't. Right. And, even then you're figuring, well, maybe they'll get one more score. And nope, they end up winning by 19. So Illinois State covers. I mean, if you were degenerate enough to be betting on FCS football, you were pretty upset tonight about that one. You might want to send your hate mail to Lujan or Jimmy or whoever for that play call there.
They ran a couple of those plays, and the Yankees just didn't get good passes off.
Yeah,
they just didn't. They would have worked. They were wide open.
Must have been their time to kind of test a few things out, but like Jimmy said, what was it? Scared money don't make money. So
Yep, we stole a show name from that now.
I saw that. I wanted to ask him something about that in his press conference, but kind of forgot it. Sometimes that is kind of my mission in life, is to try and make him laugh or smile about something, because he's always – I get the sense he hates those press conferences at the beginning of every week. And I did get him to crack a little bit for the Target Field game, because I asked him if he was going to stand at home plate and pretend he'd hit a home run or something, and he did kind of admit he had a history with it. So, yep, Dan Furman saying the line was 20. Yeah, that's what I saw too, was 20. So, and it's funny because we got Brian saying the kicker sucks. Dustman was really good last year. I mean, he also punts. Hit a couple game winners. I mean, I think his career high is only 45, so it's not like he's, Mason Crosby or a guy Justin Turner. But I mean, for him to miss an extra point, and then I didn't see it, but on the radio they said the 41-yarder was kind of a knuckleball. Very kind of I mean, that's probably one of the downsides from this game, was the special teams was well, I don't want to say uncharacteristically bad, because we know what happened at Montana State, but they've been playing well since the Montana State game, and against a better team, that's going to bite you when you're kicking the ball out of bounds and you're missing extra points.
It was hard to tell on his extra points and field goals, because their camera angle is terrible. It's so bad. It's outside of one of the uprights from behind, so you can't tell if it went through.
I saw one angle where they were showing a replay where the camera runs into a building as the guy was running the end zone. I don't know. I mean, I know it's, for one thing, folks, I know it says ESPN on there, but these are kind of more local broadcasts. I mean, obviously when they take when they're taking an SDSU or USD home game, they're just taking Midco's broadcast. So you're at the mercy of whoever's broadcasting it. Midco, obviously, much better production, good replay angles. They're going to be fine. Normal Illinois, Macomb, Illinois, well, not for not much longer, Macomb, Illinois, where's Murray? I don't even know where Murray State is. I know it's in Kentucky.
It's in Murray, Kentucky.
Oh, it is.
In Western Illinois, I know, is a student broadcast.
Yeah, there's actually
the worst.
At least they have good replay. I feel like they at least had a good replay. I mean, they have a weird score graphic, but and actually somebody did ask me for the Murray State highlights. They were in the Carbondale market, so apparently they get Murray State and Southern Illinois in that same market. And rough day for both of them.
Yeah, Southern Illinois just let it go. They had an opportunity to be looking at a seed and all this awesome other stuff, and then they got hammered.
Yeah, it's kind of the typical Southern Illinois thing, though. You always think, hey, this is their time, and then they go back to being the team that you don't have any clue what the hell they are. But that was a must, to be fair, that was a must win for Youngstown after Youngstown lost a week ago. So it's just kind of the nature of the Valley. Everybody kind of picks apart. Sometimes that's maybe, I mean, if the league is good, you cannibalize yourself a little bit with these kind of games. But we'll see. I mean, I'm not quite a believer yet in Southern, but I do think Youngstown's really good. I guess we can get into the rest of the league. But I guess speaking for the Jackrabbits, again, starting there, I mean, obviously the great start, 20-0. Bit of a fluke when you get a kick return that's fumbled right away and you're quickly on the goal line. Really good to see Jaden Yankee back. He really hadn't – I mean, I think he actually played last week, but this is kind of the first time we saw him make an impact and catches the touchdown right away. And his brother gets one. He had another one later. I don't know what more you can say about the running game and the offensive line that hasn't been said.
Right.
I mean, Amar Johnson – I mean, they both averaged – Isaiah averaged a shade under 10 yards per carry, 9.9. Amar was 9.6. I think at one point he was averaging 40 or 30 yards a carry when he ripped off the 50 and the 40. A little bit of a lull there in the third quarter, but I think Illinois State started loading the box a little more. And, we forget, as bad as that start was, they were ranked 22nd. They had, I think I heard on the radio broadcast, the fourth best run defense in the country. So it's not like you were playing the Sisters of the Poor here, but still, I mean, to get off to that kind of a good start. But, I think sometimes when you get it can be tough. I mean, I see it with Kansas City in the NFL where they get out to a giant lead and then they just kind of fall asleep. It's tough to keep your foot on the gas, especially if you kind of know you have an opponent that you probably are outmatching in every way. And, they ended up surviving that. I guess maybe the concerns, certainly we mentioned the special teams. I'm a little concerned with the pass defense right now, and it's going to get a big test next week. I mean, Zach Annexstad is not a great quarterback, I think, by any means. I don't know why the Gophers had him pegged as a star. Tells you what you need to know about recruiting. And I'm looking at some of the box scores numbers here too, but tells what you need to know about how the science of recruiting when somebody thought Zach Annexstad would be a good Big Ten quarterback and Mark Gronowski could go, get one or two offers in the FCS. I'm sure people want a mulligan on that now, but I mean, we really haven't seen the pass defense tested this year. Obviously, Drake, I guess you could argue Drake had those big plays right away in that game, but otherwise, I go back to Montana State. All they did was run, and then when they had to pass, boom, boom, boom. I know there was maybe a little prevent defense going there, but they were 1 foot away from winning the game with the one thing they couldn't do. In this game, that Sobkowitz guy was terrific, 7 for 70. I think he actually threw a touchdown pass, too, on one of their trick plays. And obviously, who's coming in next week. It's Theo Day. He's already won once on Hobo Day in Brookings. He could have easily won last year, if not for a leaping penalty. But so, I think there is a little genuine concern if I were a Jackrabbit fan about what's going on with the pass defense, especially since you do have two pretty good lockdown guys, and you think in Beenum and Dyshon.
Yeah, especially when you're facing someone like Theo Day. That guy is going to have the ability to throw it all around the yard, give you all sorts of issues. He's done it before, so I'm curious to see how they adjust. I think it was easy for the defense to also maybe get a little relaxed because they had to make one stop. They come out, and all of a sudden you've got a 20-point lead. Who's going to really be hyper focused? I get it, but they should be. It's their job. So I can see that happening, but this is going to be a serious test here on Hobo Day, especially against a team that they have nothing but problems against on Hobo Day.
Well, and I'm looking back at last year's UNI game, which was, of course, the one that SDSU clinched the Valley title on, which was won on a Hunter Dustman field goal, for those who are saying he sucks tonight, although to be fair, he got a do-over after he missed a chip shot because they called a leaping penalty in that game, which was – I saw it one time in the NFL this past week, so it does get called. It's just very, very rare. But, yeah, looking back at that game a year ago, I think State got out to a similar to this one. They got out to a 17-7 lead, and UNI just kind of kept chipping away. UNI really dominated the second half. Day in that game was 16-30, 270. They did pick him off 2 times. They sacked him 5 times. But he did get 2 touchdowns. They always seem to have some good receivers. They always seem to have a good running back or two. That's just kind of UNI's thing. Maybe the nicest thing for South Dakota State is that, unlike some of the past visits where we've seen them on Hobo Day, they're not coming in entirely desperate. It's not like they're 2-4 or, we have to win outright now to make the playoffs. They did win today. Wasn't super impressive at Indiana State, 27-20, and the Sycamores had a chance late to go down and tie. I think they got picked off. Actually, Indiana State's quarterback had a better day than Theo. Theo today was kind of pedestrian, 16-28, 176, no touchdowns or picks. They had a big day from a running back. No clue if I'm getting this guy's name right. Harrison Bay Buey. He's got a hyphenated name. 137 yards, 3 touchdowns. Their defense looked like they forced some turnovers, but they're 3-2. They're 2-0 in conference. They don't really have an impressive win, I guess, outside of, we're still kind of trying to figure out what Youngstown is. They beat them by 3 in a 44-41 shootout last week. But they really don't, they lost big to Iowa State, lost by 17 at home to Weber State, who doesn't look like they're as good. So they need to, they're not desperate like they have been in some of the years, but they really do need to get some wins with some for the resume. And obviously, if you pick off South Dakota State, and we know, Dan's saying, we know how they. I don't know if they like playing on Hobo Day or if they get motivation out of it, or if SDSU just doesn't play well. I mean, you guys have been around longer, but I think SDSU has not beaten them on Hobo Day. I know they've beaten UNI in the regular season, but I don't game when it was ironically it was 2019, and then they lost to them in the playoffs later that year at home. But I don't think they have, in the time I've been here, which is going back to 2013. I think maybe they beat them in overtime in 2014 or something. But yeah, it's been they don't. I don't know why they keep making them the Hobo Day game. Can't you put it at any other day? Like you and I.
We all say that.
Yeah, we saw that coming on the schedule when we just looked at the schedule last year when we were looking at it going, it's going to be Hobo Day. It's just the way it is. And Ron says, yeah, they're not that good. And, don't disagree with you, Ron. But, just for background, for those who are joining us on the FCS Fans Nation side of things, we don't know why, but SDSU loses to UNI on Hobo Day, and that's the way it is. Everybody's angry. I don't think it hurts alcohol sales downtown or anything. They do just fine. It's just angry drinking. But for whatever reason, just come out flat against them. There's been a lot of flat Hobo Days anyways, but I think you mix in a UNI team that, generally speaking, I think their favorite thing to do is beat SDSU. It used to be to beat NDSU, and then they haven't been able to get that done for years now. So now their favorite thing is beating SDSU, and I think it's a lot bigger game than they make it out to be for themselves.
Well, and it's not just the road. It's not just beating SDSU. The way this series has gone of late, the road team is winning. Obviously last year you had SDSU winning in the Unidome. The spring 2021 season, which we forget, started with a win in February, or it was either February or late January, because that's the world we lived in at the time. That was won in the Unidome. I think SDSU has something like a 3 or 4 game win streak at the Unidome right now, which is it's kind of bizarre because you'd think both of them. I mean, I don't know if UNI has a great home field advantage. They have some. I mean, I worked briefly in Des Moines. They get some good crowds, but obviously when Iowa and Iowa State are playing almost always opposite, that's why you always see a lot of 4:00 starts at UNI, because they're trying to avoid playing at the same time as Iowa State and Iowa. So they get some good crowds, but it's not like here where we're starting to see 19,000 a game showing up, or even in some of those other years where you're getting, they're not guaranteed to get 10 to 15,000, which I kind of feel like SDSU usually had been up until the national title game. But the road team's been winning. I mean, the last Hobo Day game was 2021, and UNI, that was ugly. I mean, that was not only that, I think the last 2 Hobo Days with them have been ugly losses. It wasn't like they were actually in the game. They were, that one they got beat 26-17. I think right away they fumbled a kickoff. They fumbled the kickoff in that game, if I'm not mistaken, because UNI scored a touchdown on a 1-yard run. I got the box score up here. Yeah, SDSU fumbled. Yeah, they fumbled the kickoff basically. I mean, it wasn't a kickoff, but they fumbled on their 5th play. UNI punched it in right after that, and it was pretty much all UNI. I don't think SDSU. The game was tied at 10 in the second quarter, and then UNI pretty much dominated the second half and won 26-17. It was kind of like that again in 2019. But at the same time, I don't want to get caught too much in the past with this program, because Illinois State was a place they didn't used to win a whole lot. I mean, I think the year Illinois State went to the national title game and almost beat NDSU, I think they housed the Jackrabbits in Normal. So it's a little, I don't always like to use, you use the history for a little bit of context, but now that this program has kind of got over the hurdle of, well, you can't go undefeated in conference. Well, you haven't won a national title, or you can't beat NDSU. Now that you've cleared those hurdles, you do kind of have to put it in the context of, okay, it's a little different era when you have a different level of confidence and you're not battling all these. Be like if the Vikings won the Super Bowl, you'd probably be a lot less stressful I feel that way as a Chiefs fan. Like every week for me is just, I'm good. I got my, I can have a nice, I'm good for the rest of my life. I still want them to win a few more, which thankfully they've done. But once you kind of see all the we can't win the big one dismissed, you do relax. And I'm sure that probably translates a little bit to the program. I've never played on a college program, but as much as those guys last year really embraced everything, even from sweeping the Dakotas, I'm sure they have to be, it just has to be a different level of confidence after you did what they just did.
Well, and we've seen with them before what happens when they have to hear about something all the time. Mark addressing last year, everybody keeps bringing up, when are we going to drop one? When are we going to have our stinker game? Whatever. And it bothers them, and they take that personally, which is good. If you're a Jackrabbit fan, you should take a lot of comfort into that going into this Hobo Day, because we're going to talk about it. I don't know if you'll talk about it, but I know on Dakota News Now, but I know Zim will talk about it in his articles. It's going to be a thing. They're going to hear about it. And it's going to bother them. So, and we don't know anymore. Like you said, it's different now. They've won the national title, but it's also different because you've got a new head coach. Not saying it was Stig's fault or anything, but there's just a little bit of a difference, especially like when he came with the bye week. There used to be issues with bye weeks. That didn't happen with UND.
Yeah. Well, and Jim Poppin pointing out, who's one of our favorite viewers, by the way. I think he really paid a nice compliment to us on Twitter. I'm glad somebody enjoys listening to me talk and ramble. But he was right, that 2016 game, I remember that well because Kellen Sulik had a 65-yard pick six. That was the game that helped seal their first Valley championship. It was a co-championship that year with NDSU. But I also remember that was my wedding night. So we had that on the radio a little bit. That was, obviously I had a lot going on. My wife was following that. It happened to be, for me personally, CSU was playing their last game ever at Hughes Stadium that night. So before that, obviously they moved into the new camp, the new facility that everybody from Jackrabbit Nation saw a few years. But for me, that was kind of a emotional thing to be seeing that the stadium that I went to, which is now it's gone. They tore it down. I watched that as we were at the kind of doing a little post game, like a little after party thing as we were running around. And CSU won that like 65-30. So it was, there was a lot of fun games going that night. Obviously, it wasn't the highlight of the night, but
I can't believe you had a fall wedding. What you do.
Yeah. That was it was just kind of a coincidence. But I proposed to my wife over Thanksgiving the year before, and she just really that was kind of a special time for us. I think that was when I first met her parents too, like a year or so before that. And then I think her grandmother and grandfather got married that date too. So it's kind of a little extra. It wasn't easy. I mean, we'd up until that point, I think it had been like I remember the week before I was playing golf. It was like 60 degrees in November, and then we got hit with an ice storm that night before. So some of my guests couldn't make it, and they were questioning my my sanity for doing the fall wedding. But fall going into winter, I guess, if we're being honest. But yeah, it worked. It was freezing that day. It was like 1 degree, but everything was inside, so it worked out good. It was a great wedding, despite all the. We had a really good reception. It was over in Brandon, and it was a fun night. But
that's awesome.
Speaking of now something that was not fun. I was wondering about that other Hobo Day game where the Jacks got their show run. 2019 was not Hobo Day. That was a 38-7 win over UNI, but it was not Hobo Day. That was Ag Precision Day. Or they have something for every game. But the last Hobo Day, the other one they had was 2017, and that was 38-18, and that was the Dallas Goddard Jake Winicky team, and they got down. I remember it was raining and miserable.
It was miserable that game. I bought a doormat from the bookstore as a seat cover, which I never used for sitting, but the bleachers were so cold, and I was not dressed appropriately, and it was terrible.
Somebody saying ban fall weddings. I liked it. They are a little cheaper, I think, probably than the summer weddings, because then you're not necessarily that. Not that was the main calculus, but you probably do save a little bit. But yeah, it's not. If you're going to do a fall wedding, you'd probably rather go to San Diego or somewhere south. But yeah, that was a bad game for Taryn. He had a couple. They were down 17-0 after a quarter, and they never were in that. But the ironic thing with that was, much like in 2019 when SDSU beat the crap out of them, and then UNI came back and beat them in the playoff game. Well, a few weeks after that Hobo Day game, Northern Iowa came in, and the Jacks stomped them. It was 37-22 in the second round. And that game was never, and that wasn't even really as close as that score indicated. So it's kind of funny how you've had those two. Like I said, these have been two of the better teams in the league. They've had some really weird meetings. It's just really weird that they're kind of going back and forth with each other when they go on the road. I remember Hobo Day in 2015. This one I really remember. It was 10-7 Northern Iowa. And I think what was the thing about this was UNI was really at this point, UNI was 2-4, and they really were desperate. And if I'm not mistaken, Stiglmeyer elected to, instead of going for a tying field goal, went for the win at the end of the game. I think it was 4th and 1 with about a minute and a half left at the UNI 10. If they kick a field goal, they tie things. They went for it, and Kyle Paris got stuffed for a 1-yard loss. I remember I had a guy from our Iowa affiliate who I sent the highlights to. He's like, "Well, congrats, you just saved Mark Farley's job." And this was 2015. And then I think somebody mentioned the last Hobo Day win was 2009. And yeah, that's accurate because they beat Northern Iowa in they beat them 37-34 in overtime. I remember at Coughlin back in 2013. But yeah, I mean, there's our history of just horrible experiences. If you were
weird with them, it's so weird, and they don't help SDSU out with how it looks because they always drop these games and fall out of the rankings, and then there it is.
Well, and the other thing that's funny about that too, and he was right, it was 24-14 in 2009, but that's the last time I think Northern Iowa won a conference title, or at least I don't know if they won the conference. That might have been Southern Illinois that year, but back in 2009, this was still when Northern Iowa was really Northern Iowa. They were before the Dakota schools came in, they were one of the preeminent powers in the league, and what was actually used to be called the Gateway Conference. I mean they were
the power.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about that rivalry they had with NDSU. That 2009 was the first year that actually it was 2008 was the first year they both came in the Valley. But remember, they got really pissed at NDSU because that first year in 2008, the Bison were picked to win the league. It was a little that they weren't really taking into the fact that Steve Walker had graduated, and there was this quarterback that had some really high ratings, but he turned out to not be very good. So, that Bison team only went 6-5, but they took a big exception to the fact that NDSU came in. And so Farley really made a point of, I think he ran it up on him a couple times. There was a fight, I think, the next year.
Yep.
But it's funny that they had all that emphasis on NDSU, and SDSU was really actually playing them well at that time. That might have been I don't think that wasn't quite the David Johnson versus Zach Zenner years. We were a few years away from that. But it's been a bizarre series between those two.
Yeah, and they really take it personally about the Jacks being better than them and the Dakotas being better than them because for a lot of their fan bases' lives, SDSU and NDSU and USD and all these teams were Division II teams, and they were rulers of the roost, and it really bothers them deep down that we're beating them. I remember there was after one of the games I think it was the game where Sulik ran back the interception for the touchdown to clinch the conference title. One of their former stud defensive tackles who was in the NFL or whatever tweeted like, "This is what it comes to. We're losing to South Dakota teams." And that's how they view SDSU. I'm sure that's probably slightly different for their team now, but their fans still, deep down, they won't say it to you, but deep down you can tell it really bothers them. And it really bothers them that SDSU's done it with UNI guys. Justin Selk came from UNI. And we've taken several people from UNI, and NDSU's coaching staff had a bunch of guys from UNI, Kleiman and all those guys. So it's interesting the way that's gone, and I think that leads to some of the rivalry that is but isn't there.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I have a pretty good little friend of mine who's UNI alum as well. I mean, they kind of get that same sentiment from being in that state across from Iowa and Iowa State, where they're constantly like the best season in UNI will be ignored. It doesn't get nearly as much coverage as a 7-5 or 6-5 year for Iowa or Iowa State. It's just, it's the unfortunate reality. They're basically right next to each other in Cedar Falls and then Iowa City. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder if Farley's on a bit of a hot seat, but I think they've also had a lot of budget issues there. So I think they're not quite Western Illinois levels of panic, but I mean, I think they have a year coming up here where they're going to play Iowa and Iowa State in the same non-conference. They're really needing the paycheck games right now. I think more than just, more than the average FCS school. They've had a lot of issues there.
Well, their AD sounds like a complete mess. That when they take away fundraising from your athletic director for athletic facilities and put it under the umbrella of the regular university, ooh, that's not good.
Yeah. No, it's a rough situation they have going over there right now. But I guess wrapping up here, because I don't think there's much more to cover with SDSU Illinois State. The two trick plays. Again, I didn't really. I saw the one that was kind of I was listening to it on the radio. I was kind of mixing in between because I was shooting a few things. But I guess you can call the one they ran in the end zone on the 2-pointer a trick too. I don't know. If it's not going to work, at least you learn it now, and then maybe, or you put it on tape, and maybe people will see it on tape and say, "Wow, that was so bad, they'll never run it again." And you'll run it again.
I'm not going to complain about it. You put up 547 yards of offense, scored 40 points. It should have been 44 points. I'm not going to get too wound around the axle about it.
I agree. Some of this is just, we're talking about the pass defense, and we are nitpicking here. To win your, right. And it was your first road game, your first true road game. I think I even heard Jimmy say, well, we did have to go on, but it's like, we know the target field was not real. I know you had to sleep in a hotel, but there's worse things. I'm sure you're not getting put up in the Motel 6 or the dive that I remember hearing about in the 1983 in that 30 for 30. They at the old NC Wolfpack team. They're like, this is the place where you brought the hookers and prostitutes with beers on the ceiling. I'm pretty sure they get better hotel accommodations on the road than most of us can probably afford if we're going on the road. But it's just interesting. I will say this, and Daniel said the trick play kind of felt very Eckish. And by the way, they're winning big tonight. They're going to get Montana next week. Montana got eked one out over at Davis. So I have a feeling, they're
going to paddle.
I think Eck especially knows. I think it's on ESPN. I think it's on ESPN too. Actually, I think it's national television.
Yes.
Yeah. He will want to put. I think Montana. Period. Anyone in that conference wants to put on a show just because of that name. And I don't know if Bobby Hawk's the highest regarded. He wasn't the first time he was there. I don't know if he's any better now. Yeah, he'll want to put on a show, but. At least the fact you can't say they're being vanilla at the very least. I think people kind of wonder, well, are they going to ever have that kind of creativity again with Eck gone? It's different, but I think I don't mind it. And in the situations they ran it really wasn't high leverage. Eventually, if they're going to pull it out, it probably will be in a high leverage situation. So they're going to do it again. They just got to get it right, because this time was a good time to just try it and see what happens. There's going to be other times where you probably need to hit them with something crazy. Obviously, the best one I still think of was Pierre, that one where they at the NDSU game 2 years ago, where they snapped it through a guy's legs, and Pierre, like what the hell? I was behind it, so I didn't even know it was snapped through the guy's legs. I just saw Pierre all of a sudden do a jump pass. I'm like, wow, that's a great play. And then I look at the replay and I'm like,
oh my God.
What? What did I just watch? So, and for the moment too, for that, obviously that game was, NDSU was kind of creeping back in it. For the moment to do that was just the ballsiest thing I think I've ever seen in my life from an offense. That's when you knew the guy, okay, make the guy a head coach. When you're pulling stuff like that, just he's getting bored. I don't know.
He's built for games like that. Your Montanas and NDSU rivalries, stuff like that.
The big moment, Jason Eck rises to that. Now, the game I was at today, which I know, and I'm going to save somebody saying, did I get my tetanus shot or not? No. The weird thing about the Dakota Dome, I will say, I'm trying to be nice. I'm being nice because I got to be impartial. There's always the same damn fly that is flying around in that building that just buzzes around me. I'm sure it's a different one, but there's always like a fly that is just buzzing around on that field. And it annoys
a lot in wastewater plants.
Good one. It happens at USD games. It happens at state football. There's just always a freaking fly. I swear it's the same one. Probably, it's probably not. They probably there's probably a nest of them growing somewhere. At least they're not wasps. I got stung once at a Montana. When I was covering Montana, I got stung by a bee or a wasp once. So that kind of sucked. But the Coyotes today, like I said at the start, very similar a little bit to what happened with SDSU. They got out, they scored on their first 3 drives, bing, bang, boom, and they were pretty long ones too. They dominated rushing the football. They had a guy go for over 190 and Travis Tice. Third quarter lull. It's a drone. Nice. I don't know what it is. It just seems like it won't die. I just want it to die. I'm sure there's people who have that same sentiment about the Dakota Dome itself. I wish it still had the Teflon baggie. I know that I think that went away when it started, like the old Metro Dome, it started getting snow. But it would have looked so cool when you had the Teflon and the white. I don't know. It looked better on the old video, although then you had the old bleachers, which just looked stupid as hell, which thankfully they've gotten rid of, obviously. But the Coyotes, they've been able to run the football better. Again, I don't know how much of a litmus Murray State really is. They at least beat Indiana State. So, and I'm pretty sure they would have, beat, I don't know if they have Western on their schedule or not. I'm pretty sure they'll beat Western Illinois. So they're at least better than what we were anticipating. There were people who didn't think they would win a game coming into the Valley. And they had a shot to get back in that game. They hit a really long touchdown on a busted play to get within 14-7. And the third quarter was scoreless. And I remember it. They were going in to score to make it 21-14, and their guy dives at like the 1-yard line, gets popped, fumbles the ball into the end zone. USD recovers, and then the Coyotes go down, kick a field goal. They got 2 more touchdowns. So they were very close in that third quarter. They're a yard away from making it 21-14, and maybe it's a different game. But much the way we saw with SDSU tonight, where it was a 2-score game, and Freeman got that fumble recovery. That shut them down. It stayed a 2-score game. And, but again, I think their defense still is playing well. Their defensive line's been really good. They've certainly established more of a running game. They're getting off to better starts, which was their big problem in the non-conference. That was pretty much, they seem to have they had another back who I had not seen play by the name of Charles Pierre Jr., which just saying that name kind of reminded me of Pierre Strong Jr., but his last name is Pierre. They had another guy who ran for 80 yards and a couple of touchdowns. Nate Thomas didn't even play, so I don't know if he's hurt again or what, but and that's exactly the kind of effort you'd expect. They could not afford to come out and fiddle around, play a close game, or get beat. That's exactly the effort they had to have coming off the win they had, and especially if they are going to be a team that maybe is contending for a playoff berth or even a conference title. They put them away even though it almost got close. You never really felt like Murray had much of a chance after the first couple of drives.
Yeah, we knew this wasn't going to be a litmus test game. Even I couldn't see any way they lost that game, even if they came out so flat they forgot to tie their shoes. Like they still would have gutted that one out, and it honestly sounds closer than it looked on the scoreboard for a second.
Yeah, like I said, it could have been 21-14 though. That guy was going in, and it was a legitimate fumble too. Credit the USD guy. I think they kind of sandwiched him, but it was a good hit. knocks the ball free. USD recovers in the end zone, and that was pretty much ball game. But again, kind of similar to what we saw with SDSU. Their offense stalled out a bit in the third, but I mean, they're getting off to better starts. And, I think it's been talked about too. Josh Davis, I think there's a big difference. Even NDSU kind of highlighted that in that press conference a week ago. They were having a lot of issues last year. Some of them we can't necessarily get into on the record, but we know they dismissed their offensive. They demoted and later dismissed their offensive coordinator who'd been with Nielsen since he was a player for him at Duluth. So they a much different looking offense, much better quarterback, with all due respect to Carson Camp. And, a guy who maybe has a little bit of his own Jason Eck in him, in Josh Davis, because they've tried some trick stuff too. So a lot of stuff.
If you look at it like with Davis going there, you go, well, USD got the blueprint to beat NDSU. If I'm SDSU, I don't know why you wouldn't send that game plan to every school in the Valley, because you want them to lose and be out of the Fargo Dome in the playoffs.
Well, that's true. Although let's be honest, some of the blueprint is it's just the Bison do not have. Although they won today, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, but it's just some of the blueprint is not having an NFL quarterback for the first time in about a decade after having and frankly, I even though he didn't make the NFL, if I were to do my rankings, I would have Brock Jensen a lot higher than Easton Stick. That kid was not an NFL player. I think he did well in Canada, actually. But that if I had to choose, who's going to win a freaking game for me, probably him, because he had that drive at Kansas State when they won. I mean, that guy had swagger. He was cocky, and he got the job done almost every time. So, but yeah, this is the first time really since that 2008, 2009 era where, and Cam Miller's better than what they had back then, but it's just not the same when you don't have that explosive, when you don't have to respect the fact that they're going to the guy can throw a 40-yard bomb or a 50-yard bomb with an NFL caliber arm. But yeah, I think nothing surprising there with the Coyotes, but again, much like with SDSU and UNI next week, just another huge game coming up in the Valley as they host Youngstown next week. I think the Coyotes are in a position. I know Matt Zimmer said this too, that, well, now it's not really a question of, are you a playoff team? They probably are, but this is one of those games that determines, okay, are you maybe working toward a seed? If you lose, then you maybe do start to worry a little bit about being farther back on the bubble. I don't think they'll ever be on the bubble unless they implode or unless NDSU implodes. But Youngstown today, we talked about it briefly at the start. They ran the show on Southern Illinois 31-3. That's going to be that's almost a playoff game in of itself next week in Vermillion.
Yeah, because all it takes is one game, losing one game you're not supposed to, and then in the Valley, all of a sudden you are sitting there going, you go from maybe we could be a seed to, oh God, now we're in trouble for the playoffs. It happens so fast. And it'll take is losing that Youngstown State game, losing a home game, and all of a sudden your playoffs are in serious jeopardy.
Yeah, it was. I think. I'm looking at Youngstown today. Boy, Nick, I cannot figure out what the heck's going on with Nick Baker. Part of me just wished he wouldn't have played for a while anyway, because we wanted Stone Labanowitz to come back for one more year. Shout out to him for following me on Twitter, by the way, but. He has Nick Baker has such moments of being hot and cold. Today he goes, I got somebody listening from Albany, Georgia. Wow.
Hey.
Cool. Welcome aboard. Blazer Bobcat. I'm guessing one of those is UAB. I don't know who the Bobcat would be, but
Montana State.
Oh, he's a Montana State fan. Nice. Could be. Yeah, well, it is kind of a common nickname in college, but I would assume that as well. No, today he goes 12 of 27 for 94 yards and a pick. You just look at these numbers and you're like, their running game is what's really atrocious here. Now, granted, I think they got down. Well, I don't think they were only down 14-3 at half. So it's not like they were getting raced out and they had to start passing a bunch, but they had 23 rushes for 6 yards. like they only try to run. I mean, most of that's Baker getting sacked, I'm guessing, but they're two between their running backs. They only tried 11 runs, and they only ran for 12 yards. It just, I don't know. And Youngstown didn't really light the world on fire with their. I mean, Mitch Davidson at quarterback was efficient. He was 14-18, but he threw a pick. They had a running back go for 107. They had a couple running backs go for 2 scores. I mean, obviously I was just kind of following it from afar, but I mean, yeah, I feel like you never know what the heck you're getting. This is why you can't trust SIU. They're never the same team.
Youngstown's a tough road trip. That's a long trip in the valley to go, and it's a tougher place to play than it gets credit for, I think.
I agree. I mean, it's the biggest place in the league. I think it's a little over 20,000. I think it's the Ice Box is what they call it, if I'm not mistaken. Ice Castle. There you go. I think Ice Box is a USHL arena, but
if they finish the other half, it'd seat 40.
Well, we forget too. You talk about the perennial powers of the old valley of the Gateway. They were it. I mean, that was Jim Tressel back in the day. I mean, heck, if Jim Tressel hadn't gone to Ohio State, maybe Maurice Clarett would have gone to Youngstown because that's where he was from and watched him. But they won. I think they won something like 4 1AA titles. Yeah, in the 90s. They were the NDSU before NDSU in the Valley, and much, they were the big physical team, and they're trying to get back to that. I think McLaughlin, who just grabbed, frankly, I think Denver should play him more because he's looked really good in the NFL. I think he's gonna. Not that I'm too happy about that as a division rival, but I think he's going to be a very good find for them, and I hope they start giving him the ball more because I think he deserves it. But they've had some good running backs. I'm aging you. I look young, don't I? I've been around for 10 years now. But yeah, I think that'll be Youngstown. That'll be one worth keeping an eye on. And if USD wins that, barring something catastrophic, they will come into the SDSU game 6-1 because they should win the following week at Indiana State. Although again, you can't necessarily assume it because look at the way the Sycamores played UNI today. I mean, it's not to say that couldn't happen, but Youngstown is the one thing that probably is. You would say if they're not 6-1 going into that game, would be because they lose to Youngstown at home.
They play the Sycamores right before the Jacks.
I heard that. I can't remember if it was you or somebody else who said that every team that SDSU is playing is getting either Illinois State or Western. That's an interesting. It is an interesting kind of quirk.
The schedule, especially if you look at like Murray State's schedule or USD schedule or teams that have struggled schedules, they've all got. It looks like they tried to do those teams a favor. I'll put it that way. With the USD has a really tough schedule last year, and they had, all the tough games, and it put them in a bad spot. And now you get to play Indiana State and Murray State and Western, and then SDSU is the only team that doesn't play any of them, which I get. They were the champion, but also, okay, I'm a little frustrated with their scheduling.
Yeah, I don't entirely. I don't know. I mean, it's not done like the NFL where you do have there is a weight to being a first place team and a second place team. They claim it's random, but I'm sure it's not entirely. I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty sure Murray State, until they actually get really good, if they ever do, will keep playing Indiana State and whoever else is at the bottom of the league. That's obviously not going to have Western much longer to pick on, but yeah, we'll leave it at that. And then as we kind of wrap up here, because it seems you've been going for an hour. Obviously, I got in a little late to the party, but the other big game, man, there's some really good games next week ahead. The other one that is really going to have a lot of eyes on it, and you can make an argument for maybe it being the best of the week, a little old game called North Dakota State at North Dakota. And the key thing here is it is in Grand Forks. That's a place the Bison, they've been playing this series. They played a little bit in non-conference before UND joined. I mean, look, and I'll ask you guys here because I was in the Dakotas in North Dakota in 2006 and 10. There was a real animosity between those. I mean, it wasn't just, you think like there's a brotherly relationship, yeah, we're rivals, but we need each other. They really didn't want to have anything to do with each other. And some of that was my understanding was that UND, the way NDSU people said was UND basically flipped in the bird when they went to Division I and said, this is going to fail, go fail. We're going to keep winning in Division II.
USD did the same thing, and it was the same way down here.
But I don't sense this. Like I sense like people were, because obviously we know what happened in 2010 when there was that late deal that UND and USD were both going to go to the Big Sky, and then all of a sudden, hey, and that was mainly the nickname thing, I think, because UND was still rolling with the Fighting Sioux. The Summit League didn't want that, but everybody was happy to have USD. It made more sense, and it ended up going the right way anyway. But I've never gotten the sense that, like, if that was the same way it happened down here, that they just cut ties forever. It felt like there is a little bit more happiness that, yeah, we may not like you, but it's probably better we have you in the league. Whereas I still think up north, they would be happy if they blew each other off the map. Literally, if they dropped a nuke on each other, I think they'd be that's the only way they'd be happy to have each other. It does feel like down here the rivalry is there, but it's like there is a recognition, especially when you get to basketball season, obviously with what the women's teams have done, and even the men's team. And to me, the best event still that I've covered was the Super Tuesday, where you had both of them playing for NCAA. I mean, I'd love that if it happened every year. The rest of the Summit League wouldn't, but it's like I said, you guys get into it. It's a different dynamic than what they have up north.
Yeah, and having lived there, I've seen it. I am also of a similar opinion that you described about NDSU and UND and things like that. There's a lot of history between SDSU and USD that's forgotten, where USD's tried to make SDSU not exist multiple times and all sorts of other things, but whatever. We're not in here for a history lesson. But one thing that does remind me of the two rivalries, it just feels like in North Dakota, they focus on it more than they do down here, where we've just, and maybe it's that USD's been here longer, so we accept it more. That vitriol of we never want to play you and go rot was forced away by conference games, I think, more so. And I think the hockey team up there also causes more animosity, because then you have UND fans saying, they've said it to me, well, you've got a JV championship. Well, go kick rocks. First off, that irritates me because you're pissing on your own university to make that insult, which is just insane. But also just, I love hockey, but I'm not going to get into that. And the interesting thing to me, though, about this game is if you look at where they are right in this rivalry and how they've been playing back and forth, it feels eerily similar to leading up to the loss in the Hail Mary and everything in the Dome.
Or even the 2019 loss, too.
Yes.
Both of them, yeah.
Really close for no reason in Grand Forks, and it feels like it's slowly spiraling into where they're going to get clipped. And if there's a year that NDSU can get clipped by UND, it feels like this should be the year.
Well, and the other big difference that you had, because obviously UND has not been in the league as long, you've now had 10 some years with USD. When they finally did resume that series as a non-conference series, Big Sky and Valley, there were no scheduled games in Grand Forks. They were all being played in the Fargo Dome. And this is, again, at the height of NDSU's, toward the end, whatever you want to call it. I'm still not entirely ready to say they're done, but it was like Bubba Schweiger had just started, and they went in there and got pummeled 2 times right away, and they still really have not played them well in the Fargo Dome. So, but that's, to be fair, I mean, it's taken a lot of teams a long time to play them well in the Fargo Dome. But unlike at least USD was getting them every other year. As it turned out, they got them back-to-back years because thanks to COVID, which, by the way, that's the one thing about the Hobo Day too. In 2020, I think it was supposed to be USD on Halloween. So don't tell me you can't move the mother bleeper around and schedule it other weeks.
I don't think it was USD. I think it was on Halloween because of when USD is. Okay. So they tried to. It just all has to do with the gate. They try to keep with if you have NDSU and USD kind of bookending each other or whatever. It's going to be in October, and you're not going to use the marker game because you want that third full game.
Well, and of course, that's one of many fun things that would have happened if we had a normal season. Obviously, I think they would have beaten Nebraska earlier in the year. So, who knows? They might have won the national. Well, but you never know, because if they'd have gone through a normal year, Mark Gronowski's probably riding the bench for another. Either way, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, like I said, they've not had a chance to play them much in Grand Forks. They got the chance 2 years ago in the fall season, and that game, the Bison won. It was ugly. It was 16-10 was the final. NDSU won that game. They were still at that point kind of convinced that Virginia Tech transfer, Quincy Patterson, was going to be the answer. And he really, that Cam Miller ended up supplanting him once and for all shortly after that. The guy did run for like 92 yards, but he wasn't much of a passer. It was kind of an old school Bison win 2 years ago. They just mainly did it with the run game. They had Lupke doing some things. But what I really remember, I think Tommy Schuster kind of made some bad. He was still pretty young, but I remember they got to the 40 and he threw a really just horrible pass that got picked off, and that led to them. So I think they led most of the way. They led I pulled up the old box score here. They led for a lot of the game. It was 7-6 UNI at half, or UND at half. It was 9. Bison kicked the field. It was 9-7. They had a lot of chances, and their offense just couldn't quite get past. And to be fair, that was a better NDSU defense at the time. But yeah, I think a lot of those guys who played on that team are still with UND now, and NDSU's got a few more holes. I would argue they're better at quarterback than they were, since they weren't really using Miller much in that game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the fact this is, and UND had an easy game today as well. They hammered Western Illinois. It was like 49-10. So like somebody mentioned that. I will say I didn't think the Bison, I wasn't that impressed with them against Missouri State. They kind of let them score right away. It was 38-10, so I guess you'd be nitpicking to do much with that, but it wasn't, it wasn't quite the blow their doors off in the first 5 minutes. It was relatively, it was 14-7 after one. So, it's just, you don't expect them to be giving up points against a team like that. Right. So, but Missouri State still had a lot of offensive yards. That might have been just garbage time. They turned him over a few times, and they're still, Cam Miller. We've heard all about his accuracy. He was 16-20 again. Went for 256. Zach Mathis had a really good game. Their receiver, he went for 6 and 160. So that's the thing. It's one thing if he's accurate, but if he's just throwing short little pass. Well, of course, if he's not taking any deep shots, you're going to be very accurate. That'll be the big question I have when they play SDSU in a few weeks. Is are they going to, again, because we were a little questioning of what SDSU's pass defense looks like. Are they going to be able to keep the Jackrabbits honest on defense with a passing game that could actually be a threat? Right now, I don't really believe they have that, but
I watched that Missouri State game, and they got lucky. They didn't get lucky, but it was 14-7. Missouri State's driving down. They're at midfield. They go for it on 4th and half a yard, and it's a bad snap that rolls back to the quarterback, and they get tackled in the backfield. NDSU goes down and scores. Now it's 21-7. Missouri State gets the ball back, drives all the way down to the 15, and the quarterback drops back. His arm gets hit while he's throwing the ball, and a little duck gets intercepted by the defensive end, and NDSU goes down and scores, and it's 28-7. So I think it was a little bit like the Murray State USD game where, not that they shouldn't have won or they weren't more talented, but it very easily could have gone the other way.
Yeah, and that's, it's just you get a win any way you can. Right. Of course, remember last year NDSU nearly lost at Indiana State. In fact, probably should have lost at Indiana State. They sleptwalked through that game. So, they did what they had to do. Now they get a very tough. It's going to be. Let's just be honest. If the Bison lose that game, they can kiss a seed goodbye. I think even if they came in and upset SDSU, I don't think with those losses to USD and UND,
you might get a 7 or 8. Maybe up to 4 or 5 because you are NDSU.
Yeah, the name recognition will carry, but man, if they don't, we'll see. Obviously SDSU's line was able to kind of blow UND off the ball, but is NDSU's line. I mean, right now SDSU has what NDSU used to have in terms of just that unstoppable offensive line that is dominating. The Bison offensive line is still, I like Gray Zabel, the Pierre kid, but I don't know if they have that kind of line that can dominate UND the way that SDSU's did. And of course, it's in Grand Forks where UND always plays better, period. But I'm guessing it'll be pretty close to a 50-50. I don't know, 50-50 crowd's probably not best, but there'll be a big, but there will be a big NDSU contention. It won't be it won't, like, I'll be curious to see what the marker game looks like this year, but we've seen the NDSU contingents in Brookings decrease over time. We've seen that stadium become more blue and yellow than, obviously the one section they get with green. So that's going to be, I mean, of the games next, the slate next week is probably a pretty good place to end on, unless there's any other big upsets or anything notable missed in the world of football today. But yeah, I mean, the slate next week is going to tell a lot about probably the playoff picture, maybe who's going to be in the mix to challenge SDSU for a conference title at this point. The rest of it, I mean, we also get some of our worst matchups too. Missouri State's playing Western Illinois. We get the toilet bowl, pillow bowl games. Missouri State against Western Illinois. Southern Illinois will probably get back on the. If Southern Illinois loses at Murray, then they have a real problem. And then you have Indiana State and Illinois State. So some of those teams that lost should get back on the horse. But those three games are just gonna be gigantic, I think, in every sense, for the way the league goes. And then of course, then SDSU has to go to Southern Illinois the week before they play USD. So Jax, it is definitely a difficult schedule, but if you're a defending champion, you probably don't, you shouldn't sweat it, I guess.
Well, if this wasn't as talented as it is, it'd be a bigger deal, and you'd throw a bigger fit about it. And it just is what it is. It's more, I bring it up and put it out there because it's becoming a recurring theme. I don't see the Valley putting UND, NDSU before or after the marker game. And that's happened 2 years in a row now for SDSU with USD, NDSU. You don't see any teams ever having to go on back-to-back trips to North Dakota. That doesn't, I looked, it doesn't happen. There's a lot of things like that. The way they have the schedule and they just sit with it, and every other year you go to UNI, to NDSU, to UND, to Illinois or Southern Illinois was how it was. But in the end, it is what it is. You just got to go out and win. Their last year was tougher.
Well, and some of this is geography too. I mean, the league is very spread out. I mean, I think I've heard them make this point up in Fargo a few times that you can pretty much count if you're NDSU or one of the Dakota schools, you're always going to be playing the other Dakota schools. You're always going to be playing Northern Iowa. That's geography, and it just so happens that those teams kind of tend to be running the league right now. That's where the power of the league is. On that other side, when you start going east, they're probably, Youngstown can probably count on playing Murray every year. Count on playing Indiana, as long as these teams are in the league. I mean, it's not to say things might not change and programs might not have down years, but it's the same thing we get when we're arguing, if we're getting into a debate about moving to FBS. Geography is not this is where geography isn't a friend of anyone's, certainly up north, but here either. I mean, there's only so many leagues in the FBS where it would make any sense. Probably really only the Mountain West, maybe the MAC, although that's still a bit of because again, that's assuming you'd have to move almost every team. There's not a whole lot of times where football gets an exemption, football only, but it's geography. That's what we deal with anyway around here. We're the flyover state that nobody goes to. So, so on that note, I think we'll probably, FBS talk now all gone. That did get brought up. Good point with Jim there that got raised about $5 million now to move up. So,
we could probably get into that another day, but I think for a serious team like the Dakota States, Montana's, whatever, if they really wanted to go, the $5 million won't be what stops them.
No, but I do think, I mean, it's like I've been saying in my many debates with this large Sam Houston fan base I didn't know existed.
Yeah, you and those three fans are getting after it.
They're good for them. They're genuinely happy about buying into a Ponzi scheme. But like I said, you brought it up, the number of the $750,000 for the TV deal. That, especially if you're getting charged $5 million now. I mean, I'm basically going to call that the Conference USA rule because, now that league's going to have a tough time adding on. But if you go to the Mountain West or if you go into the AAC, their TV deals are better, and you're getting a couple million out of the TV deals there. That USA deal where you're not even getting $1 million is just a joke. And especially if you're going to, so like you said, that's part where the $5 million I think would be a little bit more easier to stomach because you're probably going to a league that's giving you a significant share of TV money that you frankly don't get in the FCS. I mean, even though the deals for the FCS are improving, and we'll talk again. This is a topic for another day, but it's the news this week. I think it will at least help curtail these programs that are just trying to get up for a quick payday, and it will probably hurt Conference USA a little bit because now if they lose more membership, granted there's not much more for them to lose, they're going to have a tougher time. They're going to have a tougher time. I mean, I think UTEP will probably be out of there, even though they're not a great football program. I think the Mountain West if Mountain West were to expand, I think it would look to get into Texas. So they're probably looking at Rice or UTEP. I think Western Kentucky's they're kind of a quirky school. They've got a little appeal. Louisiana Tech. I mean, I could see one or more of those schools eventually getting out. I mean, Kennesaw State is in this. That's a joke. Kennesaw State played. Yeah, I mean, but either way, that's for another day. But thanks for joining us tonight, guys. That was a fun. It was a fun to do it right after a game. Granted, I was a little late myself, but that was a good time. And like I said, I think a lot to talk about next week because it's going to be Separation Saturday. I don't know if there's some cute little name we could call it, but it's going to be fun next week. Really fun.
Yes. It'll be a lot of fun games.
All right. Well, everybody have a good Saturday night, and we'll talk to you next week on the Jackrabbit FCS postgame show.
All right.